Excellent. Okay, so first of all, I have to say that I am evenly embarrassed and evenly excited about tonight. Embarrassed mainly because I've been married to Yitzhak for about 20 years now, and I cannot say that I know Oma's story. I know bits and pieces.
Yeah, Oma's not so talkative
That's
about it.
all right. So take the blame exactly. But also it means I'm equally excited because we actually get to do this. We mentioned that this is going to be in English. Um, the like we mentioned before, also this is the first time really Oma or Omama, depends what generation you are, is really speaking in this kind of forum. She's spoken kind of within the family, but this is really the first time she's spoken to an open forum, which also means that this is not a written lecture. This is not something that Oma's
No,
speaking in front of dozens of schools and classes and so on. So that's why also it can also very easily turn into a conversation, questions. As we go on, we're really just gonna wing it, as they say.
okay.
But feel free, really. I think all of us definitely will have a lot of questions. If anyone else, as we're going through, will feel free to ask any questions. And truthfully, it's not only a schut, a privilege to be able to be here with you, but amongst our friends. But it's really it's miragesh. It really is exciting.
Thank you for asking me.
And thank you for agreeing. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Oma, and why don't you just start from the beginning, I guess.
Yeah, okay. Erev Tov, everybody. As you can see, I was a child. I was born in 1932. So I was a child when the war started. And I'm going to the story from a child's vision, not from an adult, because it's very difficult, I think, if you are when you are a child and your parents tell you to do things, or you are a mother and you have to give your child away to somebody you don't know. That you realize only until you have your own children. So, and that was a long time from there. So 1932, I was born, and 1940 the war started, and in Holland it started slowly, slowly. Nobody wanted to believe that something like that would happen in Holland, because the Jews in Holland were kind of assimilated in in the community. As far as I know, my great great grandparents were in Holland already in 1700. So the Germans came, and Holland was well organized. And then first they asked you to tell your religion. No, the Jews were not ashamed to tell them that they were Jewish. So they went to the city hall and get a big J from Jew in their, uh, what do you call that, passport? Identification card. And then you were not allowed to go in stores anymore, and the kids could not go to school anymore. And slowly, slowly, slowly we were set apart. So then 30, before that in 38 we have the Kristallnacht in Germany, and my mother went to Germany to pick up one of those kids that had to flee. And the boy was with us, but it turned out his parents uh, got out Germany to Belgium. So my mother smuggled him into Belgium, of which she got a police record, because she shouldn't have done that. And when she was in Belgium, she heard what really happened. So she came back to Holland and she said, "We all will be murdered." And people laughed. So slowly, slowly, we had no help in the house anymore. We could not go in a train, in a bus, in nothing. And we went to a Jewish school. It wasn't so bad. Then we got the first people, they were called up to go to a work camp to work. And people said, well, a bit of work doesn't harm. And my mother said, we won't go, they will all kill us. But to us children, they didn't tell that. Nowadays, I think you are very different with your children. You discuss things where your kids can hear it. But when I was a child, you didn't. You kept kids out of things. It was not for little ears. So we had at home from these old-fashioned heavy drapes, and my mother made pens and backpacks to go to Poland. But she wasn't planning to go to Poland. But my father said, is Koningsborg who wants this, we have to do that. And my mother said, no, we got our own free will, we have to use our brains. Then my father was in the hospital, and my mother decided that it was time to do something. So she got in contact with the secretary of the professor where my father was, and she said, if you find a place for your children, you can come to live with me. I live in only 2 rooms in a, what do you call it?
Boarding house.
People that rent rooms.
Boarding house.
But I organized that, so she went to that lady and she said, oh, Jews in the house, we will be rich. She said, no, those Jews have no money, but we want to save their life. So my mother found somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody, and they said, if you give your child a little thing, they can't take much, because they're not supposed to see that you leave the house. So one day there is a person coming to fetch me, and my mother told me, you're not going to Poland, which my brother, who's 2 years younger than I was, and I were very upset, because everybody went on a trip to Poland, and we didn't go. And all those nice things they had made, we had no idea, but that was how it was. So she said, no, you are not going to Poland, but you will go to live where other people, they will be good to you, but it's dangerous for them, so you always have to be polite and behave. And I thought it was a big adventure. But I asked my brother, we never talked about it, but because of this, I talked with my brother about, how did you think? He said, I was scared to death. So 2 kids from one family, different. So you can imagine that everybody's reaction was different. So I went, and the first, actually I miss a part, it is not so important. First, we went with my mother together, only 2 weeks somewhere, because they said you can go back home, because your husband is in the hospital, they won't take you to Poland. But then it turned out it was not true. So we were hidden for 2 weeks, we came home for 2 weeks, and then we went all separate. My first address where I came, there were Germans living in Holland. And they didn't mind that the Jews were all killed, but they thought the kids killing is a bit much. So I wasn't told where I was going. I was there and sitting there, and I was coming inside those German soldiers. I thought I would die. But anyway, I was there for a little while, maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks. You know, a lot of people that were hiding Jewish children and adults, but especially children, after the war they said, we never got a thank you note. But we as children were not allowed, were not supposed to know the names of the people we were and the place where we were. So, and it was 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So how could we afterwards say thank you?
You didn't have any communications with them when you was there?
Sorry, I have still where I have been longer, but in the beginning, when this hiding thing started, it was new for everyone. Nobody had any experience.
So there was no like
So
personal touch with them?
You can 2 weeks, and then it was dangerous, and then somebody came and they took you somewhere else, and there you. So I
So it
could not
was-
tell you
There was
how
personal,
long I was everywhere.
there was
maybe-
personal communication, but no personal information of the things where you live. Often they were. Often she was brought in the dark to a house because that was safer, so she even didn't know how the house looked from outside.
Yeah, you didn't know where you were.
How
Who
many?
was in
But-
charge?
But sometimes it was nice, and the people were not so scared, so that was easier. But after a while, then we were crying, we had to go. But you get used to it. My brother found it much harder, but he was lucky. After several times he came to live with the same family. Only those sons of the family did a lot of ondergrondswerk. How do you say that?
Underground?
Resistance.
Resistance work. And he was 8 years old then, and they thought he wouldn't notice. But he knew there were weapons, and so he was scared all the time. So for him, after the war, he had much more to suffer from it than I, because I thought, oh well, another one.
How many times were you moved?
Maybe 70, I don't know.
17.
Yeah,
Over
17
what
or 17?
period of time?
sorry.
How long? How many years?
2.5 years.
2.5 years, and you never knew, you never knew when it was going to happen.
Yeah, I don't know.
Wow.
You don't know when the war was going to end, and you don't know if you were going to stay somewhere.
And after how long were you separated from your brother?
From
2 weeks.
September 42 till August 45.
So you were all alone. How old were you?
No, at the end of the war, but we are not ready yet. But at some time I was somewhere and they didn't know what to do with me. And the people in the resistance knew where my parents were. So they called my mother and they said, we don't know what to do with your daughter. Because I told the fellow from the resistance who came that the husband from the house took me in his bed at night. I don't have to tell you the rest of the story. So they said I had to go there. I had to leave. So my mother picked me up. My mother told her lady, and she said, bring her here. So at the end of at the end of the war, I was with my parents. And that family had a huge house, and it was in Leiden, which is a university city. And they used to rent rooms. They had a student house. So in the war, during the war, there were no students. So they said they were very Christians. They said he might as well save people. So they had all the rooms full with people that were in hiding. Not only Jews, also resistance people and they said, bring the child, she can come with us. But she has to live. My father was very Jewish, my mother was blonde. So my mother could go outside, but my father had to stay the whole time in one little room. Two beds, a table, and a washing machine. That was it. And I was in the house, and I went to Christian school the last couple of months of the war. And I went to church on Sunday with them in the morning and in the afternoon. And Mr. and Mrs. Rietveld, that was the name of the people, went with us and their daughter and her son. And one Sunday they didn't feel well, and the girl, who is a year older than I am, and I went together to church, and the priest from the council said, people that are in hiding should leave the church, because I got a warning that we get some razzia. What is a razzia? And
They would come and collect the Jews.
yeah. So I said to the girl, what should we do? She said, you go home. But it wasn't for me, it was for boys. They were collecting boys to work in Germany. So I left the church, and the next day on the wall, from the outside wall from the house, they wrote, here lives a Jewish child. So what to do now? Mrs. Rietveld said, we have survived till now, we will survive. She stays. She says she didn't feel well, and I stayed. And those people were wonderful people. They had the whole house full hidden people. And the son got a call to work in Germany, which he didn't want to. And his parents said, you better go. Where do all those people go? So he went to Germany. And one night, there's the bell ringing, and we come to fetch your son. He didn't come to Germany. And that night, that day, they got a postcard from him from Germany. And they showed the postcard, and they said, okay, we check it, and if it's not true, we come back. So they didn't come back because it was true. And luckily, everybody who was hidden there was so happy when Leonard, was his name, showed up after the war and could help. So there were all those people that took people in during the war were very brave. You got shot, your family got destroyed. There were also people that were not good. For 7 guilders, which is, I don't know how many, for a little bit of money,
27.
they went to the Germans and said, there's a Jew and there's a Jew, and they got 750. And so you have different people, and you never know how you would react if this situation is like that. And after the war, like people think, May 1945, the war was finished. It wasn't. For a lot of people, there's a terrible time after the war. First, people that survived in hiding had no idea what happened to the people in the camps. Who survived, who didn't. So the first year, it was maybe, I don't know how long it was, everybody was trying to figure out, is my sister alive? Is my husband alive? Are my children alive? Then there were people that survived, the only one from big families. There were children on its own. People showed up, and there were also people who said, oh, the Jews are back, they want to work. Or you came at your old neighbor, and you said, we gave you something to save for me, and they said, oh no, now it's ours. But it was not, but there were different kind of people. Like my father, my parents and me were in Leiden, which is a little distance from Rotterdam where we are from. And there was no train, so my father found, I don't know how, transportation to go and have a look in Rotterdam, what happened to our house and our stuff. Well, we lived before the war in a rental, so that was gone. But my grandmother's house, but it was, by the time my father could come to Rotterdam, was taken by the communist paper. and there was the printing shop, and so they said, well, you can't have your house. So where should he go to live? And then he met, by coincidence, an old worker for my grandfather, and he said, oh, great, you are alive. So somebody spat on the floor, but this was different. And he said, where do you live? My father said, I don't know yet. He said, you can live in my house. I don't work at home anymore. He did a traveling job. You live with your kids in my house. So that's a couple of months after the war, we could live in his house. Until we went to court and got our own house back. So my father they found out where my brother was, and they went to pick up my brother, and he said, I'm not going with you. You killed Jesus. And my father said, you know, that's long ago. I'm not that old. He said, but you want to go to church? In Rotterdam they also have churches. Okay, and I also wanted to go to church, why not? So, August 45 I came to live in a house from the worker, and my parents said, okay, Shabbat we go to shul, but you set the table, you do the things, and tomorrow you go to church and we set the table for you. So that didn't last long. A couple of weeks, I think, was very smart. So I think, in a nutshell, I told you something about it. I mean, I don't think it makes sense to tell you what kind of families we were. Like, some people have big traumas, but some don't, and I think it's kind of your character. I can understand. I myself had one little thing. I was somewhere, I had to sit in a closet behind the clothes in the daytime, and at night I could come out and go to the toilet and wash. And I was there maybe only 2 weeks, but still I can't sleep in a very dark room. I mean, that's my leftover. Not so bad.
Who was responsible for getting, like, how did you know when to move and who moved you? And
you know what? Like, my parents should have known that, but I didn't. I didn't worry about money. I didn't know that you have to live on rations. There was no food. I can tell you another little story. I was, at the end of the war, there was no food. But the resistance people made sure for the hidden people, they stole ration cards. They did this ration. And so they got rations. And there was a central kitchen where you go with your bucket and you got a ladle of soup. So one day, Ati, my hidden sister, and I went to the central kitchen with the bucket for everybody, and we dropped the bucket. So what now? So we scratched it from the floor, and we lay on the floor, and we licked the floor, because we were hungry. So we came home, and Mrs. Sweetfeld said, you didn't bring much. We said, but we ate already. What could you do? And one night, Ati and I stole a little cube of which you make soup cubes. I don't know, do they still exist? And we made ourselves a cup of soup. And until today, I feel bad about that. See, because everybody was hungry. There was no water. You go to the toilet, you could not flush the toilet only after soup. There was a bathtub with water, you could get some water. Nowadays we have no idea. I mean, in Israel said, oh, we have to be careful with the water. We don't know what's careful. We have to be not destroying food. Well, I hate it when I see food go in the garbage. Maybe you can understand it.
Tell them what you ate at the end.
Huh?
Tell them what you ate at the end, not only food.
Ik kan niet verstaan.
Vertel wat jullie aten van de tulpenbollen.
Oh yeah, on Sunday we had extra food, so we had tulip bulbs. And you take out the middle, that is poisonous, and then we got bulbs to eat. That was extra. And we had all the suikerbieten. I don't know, the beets from which they make sugar, we ate that during the week. We had those little stoves and we stole at night. I did that also. Stole some wood or branches, or even one night we stole a whole tree. And yeah, it sounds ridiculous, but it was the only way to cook, to get warm, to have some hot water or make some hot drinks, because it was cold. There was no food, just every little bit helped. So kids were not so, I mean, if you see a child in the street, you don't think he's stealing. My mother was blonde, and she was very good in making friends. And in the neighborhood where she was hidden, there was a big country house with lots of grounds. And she got permission to walk between the trees and pick up the twigs. And with this little thing with some twigs. And my father was sitting the whole day in that room. So that was helpful. There were all little things. We stood in line the whole night for some food, and then by the time it was your turn, it was finished. So after the war, I said, I'll never stay in line for food anymore, which I won't. So maybe you have some questions.
Were you separated from your parents
Huh?
Were you separated from your parents the entire time?
I was with my parents the last couple of months from the war.
And were you in touch with them throughout at
No.
all? Nothing.
Once they visited me, and it was in Laren, and my parents came, and I didn't like them very much. They just had dropped me off, and my mother said, "Come sit with me." I said, "No."
And they were in hiding in their own with other families?
Yeah, they were even in another city. Yeah, my father and mother were a long time in the same address. They started with the secretary from the professor, but they couldn't stay there. And slowly they came to this Rietveld family with the big house, and there they stayed over a year. And I'm still in touch with the daughter. The rest, well, I'm 90, so the rest is still older. They died. But the daughter and I are still kind of sisters.
How was the feeling in Holland after the war? How long did you stayed for the rest?
My family stayed in Holland after the war. After a couple of months, and in the court, they got my grandmother's house. So we lived in that house, but my mother hated it. She said, every corner of the house remembers me of the family life of my brothers, sisters. So it's the first year you were still waiting. Who is alive, who is not alive? So then you live, I mean, as a child, for me the house was our house now. But for my parents it was hard to live in that house. So after a couple of years my mother sold the house and they moved to another.
And then was there animosity with the neighbors? Was there any hard feelings?
No, we lived in the middle of the city. in our old house were
Nee, ze vroeg hoe de mensen reageerden naar jou of de mensen.
in the neighborhood, in the house for my grandparents, you have nothing to do with your neighbors. But in our old house, on the main floor were people that were working with the Germans, and when they, I think my mother or my father, one of my parents, came there to. We had a clock for Shabbat too, so they came to see if they could get the clock out of the house, and then the neighbors from downstairs, the one that worked with the Germans, they saw my mother and they spit on the floor and they said, "What are you coming to do here? Taking our jobs again?" I mean, so, but some people, they came in the street and they said, "Oh, I'm so happy to see you." So, different people, different attitude.
So if your parents were in hiding, why couldn't you and your brothers stay with them? Why did they have to separate you?
Sorry.
Why did your parents have to send you away if they were
Can you-
also in
can-
hiding?
Yeah, sure. So she's asking why you weren't with your parents. Why were you separated from your parents and not
Because
hiding
it
with
was
them?
very difficult to find people that were so brave to take you, because it was very dangerous. If the Germans found out, or you had Dutch people, they called the NSB, they were working with the Germans, and they knew that the Jews were hiding there, they got like 5 guilders. They tell them there's a Jew there. Okay, they came, they brought you to Poland or they shot you. So it was not easy to find places to live. And the people that took you in a house were very brave, because they saved you, but they brought their own family in danger.
And it was easier for them to save children, obviously. So was that the reason that you separated? Was easier?
Yeah. So you also, she's asking because it was easier to save the children.
Right. So-
In other words, if you were alone as a child, it was easier to hide you and save you.
Because sometimes they say it is a cousin or, and Rotterdam, the city where I lived, was during the 5 days of war was bombed, and there were a whole lot of children that lost their parents, of their home, so they just said it's a kid from Rotterdam, they need a place. And for children it was often it's a bit easier than for adults to find a place. But a whole family, nobody wanted a whole family. I mean, you have no house to, the neighbors were not supposed you were there. Like the first 2 weeks, we were with my mother. When my father was in the hospital, we were with my mother somewhere. And I was a speech therapist, so he had people working with, and so in the daytime we had to sit, but my brother was 8 and I was 10, or I was 7 and 9, I don't know. We had to sit on a chair, so my mother had to keep us busy the whole day. It wasn't so easy, because people were not supposed to know that you were in the house. Because you couldn't ask, "Are you okay?" You can't ask people, "Do you work with the Germans or do you against them?" You have to know people very well. So that's why people didn't. Some people afterward took a long time to find each other again.
You had more family there? Other than,
My mother had 6 sisters, 3 survived and 3 didn't. And 1 sister didn't survive, but 3 of the 4 children did survive. So that was how it happened. 1 child no children, and people that knew that they had a child in hiding and they could not find it back. And it was the Catholic Church that tried to hide children, to make them into good Christians.
After the war.
Huh?
After the war.
Yeah. Yeah, after the war they didn't want to know that there were Jewish children. So there were children, they never got back to their family.
So how did you met your parents in the end? How did you?
I was with my parents at the end of the war and I have no idea how the rest was.
How they found
You
you?
know, nowadays I think it's very different. When I'm 90 now. I'm a, yeah. And so 80 years ago you didn't talk about things with kids. And little children had to go out. I think it's very different nowadays. Kids are much smarter and they watch television. And,
When you were in hiding, you were alone for a lot of the time.
yeah.
Do you remember what you did to like keep yourself occupied? Did you make up games? Did you play with yourself? Like, how did you keep? Because as a child, that must have been incredibly difficult.
No, I don't think it was so terrible. I think it depends on the child. There were children that went to school. I also went for a short time to school, but then something happened and you had to go again. I went to the school where the children of the Queen and the King from Holland went later. So, but not at that time. But then something happened and you have to go. So I don't remember being bored so much. No. Scared sometimes. Bored not so much. No.
Do you have any kind of,
One family they had little kids, so I learned how to cook and how to look after kids. And if I could do it right, I got with the what is a pollepel?
Wooden spoon.
With a wooden spoon. So, and then you learn. And then after the war, I turned 13 in August, and the new school year in Holland, I think you too, starts in September. So my father said, it's your age to go to the high school, but I didn't go to school for it. So that was not a success. Not at all. Anyway, in the long run.
When you got back with your parents after the year and a half, was it hard to like get back with them? Were you upset with them because they left you, or?
No, because I was with my parents the last couple of months.
Yeah, but I'm saying when you got back to your parents for the last couple of months after you've been away from them.
No, I
for
think
2 years.
I understood that.
You
Yeah.
understood.
For my brother, who was more littler, it was much harder. He didn't want to go home. He said, "You Jews killed Jesus. I don't want to live with you." So, but slowly. It was, my parents were lucky. They had each other and both their children. For a lot of people, it was much more difficult. There was either one parent or no kids, or, well, you've read about that. I think I don't have to tell you. And I think the years after the war was for the adults very unsettling to get back to normal life and to make a living and to find part of your family and to find out who was killed and who was not killed. That took a long time. It was not like in Holland. May the 5th was my father's birthday. He got on the end of the war for his birthday. So it was a nice birthday present. But it was not the end of the war. You have to find out how many of your families were still alive. How were you going to make a living again if you had a business?
What did your parents do before the
My
war?
father was a broker.
What
So
does that
it was
mean?
not so difficult to get
Broker what? Doing?
houses.
Oh, right, it is.
It was real estate.
No real estate. And
How long did it take you to realize that, you know, your cousins were dead or?
yeah, my mother had 6 sisters, and 2 were alive. No,
Yeah,
there
you-
were
you- you
6
were 12.
sisters, and she and 2 were alive, and 3 and the families were gone. So it was not easy to start it again.
How long did it take her until she figured out what happened to each, and how did that?
I think a whole year,
The whole year.
all around. We didn't get a house back, so we lived in another person's house for a while. And slowly you can slowly come to a life and make a living, money, and got some, like when we got our house back, we had no furniture, we had nothing, so we got some sheets before the window from one person, and we got a garden table from another person, and we got some beds. I mean, there was nothing. You can hardly understand now how it is. There was nothing. But it was very much better because the end of the war, it was not only bad for the people in hiding, but there was no food, there was nothing to heat the house, there was short of water, there were razzias the whole day. The Germans were desperate, they were shooting left, right and center. So I mean, everything was better than that stress.
Did your
Sorry,
did your parents consider to leave Holland after the war, maybe to United States or to Israel?
second.
Did your parents consider leaving Holland after the war?
No.
Maybe to the States or nothing?
No?
Yeah, my mother, but my father said no. My mother said, let's go to live in Palestine. It was not Israel. And my father said, you want me to dig in the ground? I've never done that before. The war was enough. I have enough. And now,
And what about United States?
no, never thought of the States. The only place they've thought of was here. No. No, they never.
Do you remember the community life beforehand? You mentioned like your father was very religious, and do you remember life beforehand in the community and shul and stuff like that?
Before I could, no, I do not much remember from before the war because there are so many impressions. I know Friday nights we always ate with my grandmother, but that's about it. But I know after the war, my father was the rabbi in the shul, and
The community as a whole, where did it have like, were many of them many of them survive as a community? A lot of them were killed. A lot of them moved. Like, what was the community afterwards?
I don't know that. I do know that the friends from before the war, they were moved in no more there.
Right.
So
And I have to ask one. You just threw it out randomly, but about your mother going to Germany to saving a Jewish child and bringing him to Belgium. Do you know what was the story with that?
Sorry?
You mentioned about your mother, who traveled before, or were doing work to Belgium and to Germany.
My mother had a German boy from, we had at home, David, I think his name was, I can't remember. We had a boy in the house who escaped from Germany. And there were more German children coming to Holland. And then at some time she got I don't know, she got notice that his parents were in Belgium. So my mother brought the boy to Belgium, which was illegal.
Right.
So she had a
They
police
caught her. Report
and
her.
that's how years after the war this little boy found my parents back.
Oh, really? So you,
Because of the police report?
Because he wrote to the police in Holland and said, I was at one time living with a family in Rotterdam, and there was a man, a woman and 2 children, and he knew where it was, and they figured it out. And then it was my parents didn't live anymore. So my brother one day phoned me and said, did we have at one time a German boy in the house which was not our brother? I said, yeah, I'm from Germany, because he was too little, he didn't remember anymore. He said, he phoned me, he lives in America, and he wants to see us. So he came, and he had a daughter in Beersheba. So he came to say thank you. He survived the war. But I only remember that he was in our house and that he was allowed everything what we never had. And he had a toothache. My mother sat next to his bed the whole night. She would never have done that for us. But she felt sorry for the guy. Yeah.
and are you in touch with any of the 17 families that you went through? Do you have any contact with them?
Yeah, I
afterwards?
have some families where I'm in touch with. Like the Rietveld family, but
Did you ever get back to one of the houses? To see
only one.
Only one?
No, I tried to find a second one because later I came to live in a village, Laren, which is like an hour and a half from home, maybe by car. And I knew I was hidden there, so I walked around and I thought it was that house. And I don't know how I found those people back, but my mother found them back. And the fellow, I was hidden in Laren with a family, and there was a Jewish husband and a non-Jewish wife. And the husband, this is a whole separate story. The husband fell in love with another lady, so he left his wife, and she said, stay till after the war, it's so dangerous for you. Well, he left and he was killed. So, but she survived, but I had to leave there because of his thing with Asperia. I don't remember her name now. And I found her back after the war.
Wow.
And even Ineke came there, my daughter came there for for lunch sometimes.
No, I went to school in Amsterdam and we lived outside Amsterdam and she lived there. So then I would stay overnight at her place. And Marcel, before we were married, was friends with their son.
Just bij mij.
Just the big day.
They lived 3 minutes from where we were living.
Yeah, it's a small world. Yeah.
Can I ask one?
Yeah, you want me to ask? Oma?
Uh,
Roni wanted to know if you ever wore a yellow star or you went into hiding before.
Good question.
if I ever wanted that.
If you
Yeah,
wore
yeah,
the yellow,
I think my brother was too young, he didn't have to. But I had the yellow star.
So you were.
Yeah.
That was at the
Little
beginning.
kids didn't have to wear the star.
That was before you went into hiding.
Yeah. And my father was in the hospital when my mother decided to go in hiding. So she went to the hospital and he got dressed. He said, do I have to go for another
Test.
onderzoek?
Test.
Yeah. And she said, get dressed. And then she took his star. And he said, what you
Start
doing? That's not
the start
allowed.
of
She
that.
said, you're not going home anymore. We are going in hiding. He said, I never wanted that. He said, she said, you have no choice. So that's how my father was pushed into hiding. And then later he was very grateful.
Was that relatively early?
Huh?
Was that relatively early when they went into hiding? Meaning in terms of like when did others not go into hiding or
Yeah,
they
that
started
was
deportation?
not so early
Sorry, what
because I was first thought to be safe
Thank
in the
you.
hospital.
Thank you.
In 43, I think it was in 43. I don't know that. You know, there are a lot of things.
Right.
Like, you were a child, you were not supposed to know things. So, things you hear, and I was with a family, they were Germans. And they said, you are a lousy Jew, but you are a child, so you're not too bad for the world. So I was a lousy Jew. Anyway, any more questions? Could I answer? I don't know.
Yes.
I mean, I gave oversight from all of us. My brother said he was always scared, but I wasn't. I mean, that's different. That's your character, I think. You can't help it. That's how you are.
In general, after the war finished, were people aware of the atrocities that had happened, and was it spoken about? Like, 3, 4, 5 years later.
Sure.
She's asking once you settled after the war, 3, 4, 5 years later, everything that happened, all the atrocities, was that spoken about within the community, within your parents?
No, not much. No, not much.
How long?
Well, we were still friendly with some people who were hiding, so we knew them. But you didn't talk about those years, actually. No. Later, much later. I think, did we ever talk with you as children about the war?
All the time.
No.
Yes,
All the time.
Yeah.
all the time. But
Oma, not Opa.
you,
Yeah.
not my
But
father.
Opa never spoke
I
about it.
never heard anything from my father. From my mother, I heard always.
Finish your food.
No, not finish your food, but what did you, even when I had kids, my mother always said, like, how much did he eat? How much did she eat? And I never paid attention, but that was an important thing.
See, some things I don't even know.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. My wife's parents, so they were in England during the war, and your
Where
mother
were they?
carries that same sort of food trauma.
Where were they?
In England.
England.
In England.
It's just national.
Oh, but that was
But
quite
there was-
different.
Yeah, absolutely. But she still carries that idea of like there was rationing, there wasn't enough food. It was like
Oh, there
that
was
same
not-
sort of
yeah.
feeling.
I have a friend who was in England and she said that the war was terrible. We had to share a banana or
Were there different levels?
Huh?
This is a weird or difficult question, but amongst the Jews after the war, were there different statuses of
No,
like
you
people
know,
who were in
after
the
the war
camp?
it was very different. Before the war, you had Aguda and Mizrahi, and they were always separated.
Right.
And after the war, everybody came together.
But was there a status of like a Jew who survived Auschwitz and the camps versus Jews who had it easier in England or?
The second generation has a different view. There was a difference between the people
Yeah.
who were hidden and the people who were
In the camps.
Yeah.
I didn't know the difference, but those people were treated different.
I know someone who came back from Indonesia, you know, in Japan.
Indonesia.
They were in the camps from the Japanese. And those camps were not good, but like 30% got killed, and here 30% survived. So when he came back to Holland, he said he thought he would see all his friends and he could tell about his experiences in the camp. He said the people in the camps in Germany had it so much worse that he couldn't say anything. So I think there were differences. Maybe as a child you didn't know, but he was a bit older. Yeah.
How,
I heard so many stories.
when and how did you meet your husband?
Sorry?
When and how did you meet your husband? Did he have a similar experience?
Oh, I know. Oh, no. My husband was hidden in the south of Holland, and they didn't have. Oh, I didn't even tell her. The last winter there was no food at all, so everybody was so hungry. But he was hidden in the south of Holland, and it was liberated early. So they didn't have the last winter, which was the most terrible part. Well, they were shooting left and right. And so, but how did I meet him? At my house in the sukkah.
The story is old as past.
Her mother, of their parents.
Oh, it's so cute.
Simchas Beis HaShoeva.
Yeah, that's actually my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law was invited to my mother's sukkah, and my future husband, which I didn't know, had to bring her. She didn't drive, and he drove the car. So he came to the sukkah, but she was invited because of her son.
Worked out. It worked out okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I think if he had known it, I'd never done it. I mean, I was 18 years old. You don't do what your parents tell you.
No.
Well, I don't know about you all. Maybe you're all such good kids.
Are you? Yes, you do everything I say?
Yes.
They're not 18 yet.
Yeah. Any more questions, maybe?
Is there a reason, like, you said before that you'd never told the whole story before. Was there a specific reason for it? In this kind of form. But you'd said it in the family before.
Yeah.
It comes
yeah.
up. It comes
But
up
I've
in a
never
lot.
done this. So,
It always
so
It would come up randomly, but it
Yeah.
wasn't. We didn't sit down and.
no, I've never. Some people write the story down, but I've never done that.
You never had that urge to write down the story, or?
No. No. We thought we don't talk about it.
My mother always said, I didn't have a bad time during the war. It was not so bad. We had good times. For years, that was the whole thing.
Yeah. I think it was different for everybody. Everybody is an other person. You can see that for me and my brother. We were raised in the same house, and we came out, and he has this. Yeah, he's never got really over it. And I think it didn't trouble him much. So you can't help it.
Is your brother in Holland now?
Yeah.
He's still in Holland.
Yeah.
You said that after the war you went back to your grandmother's house. Why not to why not to the house that you were
we used to live in a rental, and there were other people in it, and my grandmother was killed by the Germans in a camp. My brother, who was little, and I phoned him to ask. I said, "How did you know that?" He said, I don't know, I can't remember. But he came home one night and said, I've heard that tonight all the old people, they are going to be collected. So my mother went to my grandmother and said, you have to come and sleep with me tonight. And my father was in the hospital, and my grandmother said, you have 2 little kids, you have enough on your head, I don't want to do that. And my mother said, they don't have time, we will find a solution tomorrow, come with me. No, she said, I won't. So she didn't, she was brought to Auschwitz and she was killed.
And how did your parents get your grandmother's house back?
Yeah, and
But how? Because surely somebody else had taken it.
No one used it?
yeah, my grandmother was already put out of her house and lived with her brother because there was there was a sort of community home for the Germans. It was a big house. And then right after the war, my parents were in another town and they couldn't go right away to Holland. There was to Rotterdam, there was no transportation. So the Communist Party took the building and they made their office and things. So they had to go to court, but it was in my family's name. A house, I don't know about here, yeah, also. Houses are registered.
It's a deed.
It's much easier with real estate to get back than other things. So, but they had to go to court and it took till August till we got the house back.
Wow.
So,
45.
After the war, did you go back to school in?
yeah, after the war,
Um,
I went back to school September 45. And I went to high school, but I had been to school, so there was a disaster. But the next year went better, and in the end I got some diploma. But I was never brilliant.
And they were talking about, were you talking about among yourself about what happened in the war with your friends? No talking.
No, we always said, we have been hiding, it wasn't so bad. People from the camp were much worse. Don't talk about yourself. The people in the camps had much harder life. So you were not supposed to talk about it.
Do you remember the declaration of the State of Israel, how the reaction was in the
Oh
community?
yeah, sure.
What
It was
happened?
1947, then I was 15 already.
Right, and how in the community, like how was, did
No,
people decide to move to Israel?
We didn't have a radio, we had something, radio distribution. How do you explain that?
It was a cable that ran into the house, and you had 4 stations. You had a switch with 4 stations, and a loudspeaker. Like it wasn't a receiver or something. It was
We didn't have.
like cable, but
Fiber.
yeah, fiber.
And so we were sitting. I remember my mother, my brother, and I were sitting there, hearing what was the vote.
The vote, the what? The UN vote?
Huh?
Or the what?
In the UN.
The UN vote.
Right.
Yeah.
And in the community, the Jewish
And then
community there,
after
was there like a
We
euphoria?
went to shul.
Went to shul?
Yeah.
And did the Jewish community then, a bunch of, did a lot of, anyone in the community decide to move to Israel then, or didn't have much of an effect?
No.
You don't know?
I don't know.
No?
Yeah, I do know.